Rembrandt produced this etching at the age of 22. With Rembrandt, etching finally became a genuine art form. There were earlier works, like those of Dürer, who etched on iron plates between 1515 and 1518. It was a medium of mass communication, and Hogarth used it to satirize the ruling classes. One printmaker who combined the genius of his artistry with the mass exposure of prints was Goya. His sympathies, as expressed in the Disaster of War series, led to a complete censoring of his work. David Blackwood, whose grandfather captained this sealing ship, is a printmaker. His subjects are his experiences and memories of Wesleyville, Newfoundland, where he was born.
But this is the very important part, of course, the most vital part of the entire plate, really, because the initial design determines what the final impression will be. So if you have a very weak design, very weak drawing, then you're in trouble all the way through. It's a very ancient formula of beeswax, tar, and varsol. And using varsol as a solvent, it's diluted and then painted on the plate. It has to be heated in order to melt the wax so that it flows on more evenly, to protect the surface of the copper that you do not want the acid to come in contact with. We're transferring the final design to the surface of the wax using a carbon paper and reversing the drawing, of course, so that when the etching is done on the surface of the copper, it is done in reverse.
Most of them is beyond it now, boy. The ones that's remembered it. There was hardly a family in Newfoundland what didn't lose a man at the house fields. See, it was the sealings, much of the fishing that brought him north from Bonavista to Cape St. John. The sealing, and the race for the seal pelts and seal fat in the drift house in the spring of the year. every spring, with the ground still white as a sheet, the men of Wesleyville would get all worked up about going to the house and get their stuff together. The young fellers, not yet 16, bedlammer boys, we calls them, would get all excited about their first trip to the ice fields. And always the old fellers, of course, remembering.
From a technical point of view, the thing could be finished in a few days of continuous work. But you do have to spend a great deal of time considering, the various moves and to what extent you want to carry certain things forward. Then the needle, of course, is used to retrace the line, but moving through the surface of the wax to the copper. And you can see the shiny copper now appearing as the needle penetrates the wax here. The plate is then transferred to a bath of nitric acid. And this gives you a very fine etching on the surface of the copper, a very faint outline.
Oh, look, his boat is painted green, me buys. Look, his boat is painted green, the prettiest little boat you ever seen. Aha, 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 my riddle my day. Look, his boat's got a high stop jib, me buys. Look, his boat's got a high stop jib and a painted block to her foremasthead. Ha, 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 my riddle my day. Oh, look, his boat's got a fine forecutty, me buys. Look, his boat's got a fine forecutty and every seam is paid with putty. Ah, 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 my riddle my day.
The winters were wonderful lean most times and a treat to stay clear of. But if a fella was handy with a muzzle loader now, and there was always the burdens, Turs and ducks and backs. It's wonderful eating, right? And a nice change from the fish. Funny, isn't it, when you get to thinking back how the Christmases is grained deeper in your mind than most other days, And how the old songs and the foolishness of the sealing men in their mummers' dress stays with you through thick and thin.
Come on, Jake.
Thank you.
has been transferred from the acid bath into a tray of water to dilute the acid on the surface. Then Versol is used to remove the wax, revealing the very basic outline of the design. A card is used to apply the ink to the surface, making sure that all of the lines get a good measure of ink. And then the excess ink is removed from the surface, of course, so you end up with the very basic line containing the ink, and this gives you your first impression. After the inking, the plate is taken to the press bed, and of course when the bed comes through at the other end, you have the design impression on the plate in its most basic form.
Oh, that story about the great last party had its proper start when the crowd in St. John's took the wireless out of the steamer in Newfoundland. They never saw it as an outfit for safe days, eh? Just another luxury. Too good for us boys in a condemned old vessel. Next thing you know, there'll be rotten bunks to sleep in. So when the Newfoundland cleared Wesleyville Harbour on the 14th of March 1914, she had no connection with the rest of the world, sir. The skipper was Wes Kane, 29 years old, 13 years younger than his vessel, sir. His brother Joe was in command of a fine, quick boat called the Florizel. And their old man now, Abraham Kane, the greatest seal killer in all the world, was aboard the Stefano. By the 31st of March, the Newfoundland was froze solid in the ice. Stefano, Florizel and the rest was in the fat and killing seals. So Wes Kane says to George Tough, "'Tis hard to see the others in the thick of it, and we not able to reach 'em." And George replies, "There's no trouble to walk to 'em, Captain."
Here you're using literally millions of tiny rosin particles, and the acid, of course, will work between each particle. And controlled in a nitric bath, this will give you the various gradations of tone that you require. In order to get the rosin to adhere to the surface of the copper, it has to melt. And this is quite tricky because if it becomes too hot, it just evaporates. Traditionally, it was referred to as aquatent. Today, the contemporary term is rosin, introduced by the great Spanish artist Francisco Goya. Prior to this, of course, most printmaking involved exclusively line work. If you wanted it black, you simply used a complex series of cross-hatching.
That night, 4 miles away in 4 groups to spread their weight, 98 men got set up for the night on the ice. They built up walls to cut the wind, started to light fires from flagpoles and gaffs, pungent with the grease and the blood of seals. And then it started to rain. And then the wind swung round to the north and the temperature dropped 20 below. And then the dying begun. By 8 o'clock that second night, the wind was at force 6, and the frost was something wonderful fierce. Old Uncle Ezra of Cat Harbour was dead, right on the edge of the water, with every splash putting a thicker coat of ice over him. Mines were far away now. Uncle Jacob Mullet spied his own house, with the flag all down half-mast, and himself laid out. Others were meeting loved ones, or yarning with their old friends. At the dawning of April 2nd, Captain Westcane, eye in the barrel, spyglass to his eye, swung round to the southwest and spied his man, George Tuff, staggering around, snow-blinded. "By God," he cries, "out there 2 nights out in ice." In all, they hoisted aboard 124, 69 to lay on the decks like cardwood logs, and 8 was never found. The rest was hardly alive, though who can say what limbs was lost, what minds was taken strange.
We're using a wax crayon to actually fill in between some of these minute particles of rosin. And where the wax crayon line is applied, of course, it gives you a very light area. If you're concerned with the total preservation of the surface of copper, in order to achieve a white area, you would paint out that area completely using a varnish. This is the black areas that you see here. You actually see a combination of the crayon and the solid black area, which we would want, of course, as the white glow area of the flame. So we're not allowing the acid to touch that surface at all. It has been stopped out completely. We require even darker areas for the figures here, and they're being exposed again to the acid in order to make that surface much darker. The acid in reality is burning deeper into the surface of the copper here, giving you a much stronger texture, and this will give you a much darker surface. And now the varnish or stop out is being removed. And the plate has been carried a stage further in terms of the tonal quality that we want. You can see here the texture of the figures where the acid has worked deep. Of course, the plate has been inked and wiped, carried to the press bed again for a further impression. The felt blanket cushions the great force of the steel roller and is a great aid in pressing the paper into the lines of the plate. There's a tremendous pressure here, roughly 4 ton to the square inch, so the paper is literally forced into the line on the copper plate. You can see the various gradations here. Illustrating various periods that the plate has been in the acid.
Take me back to my western boat. Let me fish off Cape St. Mary's, where the hog down sail and the foghorns wail, with my friends the Browns and the Clarys.
The great sailors finally disappeared, just like the seals. They was teened out by the government in Ottawa, see? The places where they was born closed down by the government crowd in St. John's, and everybody laid off in the factories by men who hated fishing and fishermen. Well, there's no more spring parade of lads in skinnywappers now. Oh, by God, with their small bags of oatmeals and raisins, and their sculpin knives, and their gaff sticks. There's no place for them now, see? Except in the old tales and old memories. But what a wonderful crowd they was in them days. And the whole world knowed it too.
In my own technique, engraving is mainly used to fortify certain areas. Various tools can be used to remove dark areas if you decide that they're a bit too extreme or unnecessary. An engraving tool is used to cut a very strong, decisive line. Once you've decided that you want something which is very strong and permanent on the surface of the copper, the engraving tool can be used. Now, traditionally, of course, entire prints were done with this particular tool in varying sizes and in many cases using a magnifying glass to do very complicated and intricate work. But it requires a very, very special skill using the graver. And very, very little work is done today using this particular technique exclusively. But it's a very quick way to fortify a particular area. The varnish used here is $75 a gallon. It's the very, very finest quality of varnish, and using a very high grade dry pigment. There is a serious problem today with so many synthetic colors. It's necessary, if you want any form of guarantee for longevity of color, you have to mix your own. The two colors here have been applied to the plate, of course, and in the final result is a very subtle transition of color from the red into the darker area surrounding it. This involves a very careful blending of the two colors. The printing, the final printing. Once you've decided exactly on the quality of color that you want in the final work, and you feel quite contented that the thing is finished. Now it's conceivable that you could go on for a longer period of time and do more work on it. It's very, very hard to say when something is completely finished, because it could be simpler, it could be more complex. It simply reaches a stage of development and stops. You might feel at that particular moment that it's finished, and you proceed to do the final printing.
My name is David Blackwood, and I want to welcome you to Port Hope and my studio. This is the studio building, which is separated from the house. So I'm very lucky. I'm able to leave the house and walk down to the back of the garden, and this is the workshop. I studied with a great landscape artist, regional Ontario, Carl Schaefer. And Schaefer would say, what you have to do, take 30 minutes, look at the landscape, absorb it, feel it, then turn your back on it and paint it. And in that way, you're not going to be copying, you're going to remember. Thompson was there, he was a Canadian, he was looking at a Canadian landscape, which he loved and painted. As Canadians, we all relate to Northern Ontario or the landscape. I was very impressed with the fact that here was this person living in the woods. This was his world, his life. He was responding to his immediate surroundings. That was his subject matter, was what he was living on a daily basis. You didn't need to be painting from the model. You didn't need to be doing all this stuff, you see. There was something ethereal, perhaps, about Northern River. Like, you know, it was Japanese, Oriental, and wonderful color, and different from, there was a lace work in the painting, I guess. Copperplate etching. You start out with a beautiful blank, shiny copper plate, and then, you know, with a series of drawings and transfers. And as you work on the plate, you take prints to see what you've achieved. This is the very first impression from the plate we saw back there, which is an outline of everything. In this particular print here, we've just worked on the sky area. Over here, we've worked in the water area. And other impressions down the line, we would be working on the sails. 12 or 13 stages down, you would have come close to being finished. I'm at a loss to understand why Canadian art is not sort of recognized, you know. If you offered the West Wind to the Metropolitan Museum in New York, would they want it? Would they accept it? But my God, we've been ignored.
I'm here at the AGO with David Blackwood, a renowned Canadian artist, Order of Canada, one of the most internationally appreciated Canadian artists. And I'm also here with Dr. Catherine Loughnane, Senior Curator for Special Exhibitions at the AGO. Welcome to ArtSync. Congratulations on this exhibition, which I understand runs through June 17th. And I know that, David, it is a retrospective, if you will, of prints as well as paintings and other material, but primarily prints from approximately 1960 to the present. And it is also a representation of prints that you and your wife Anita have donated to the AGO, which I think all of us in Canada are extremely grateful for, so thank you. The exhibition is something so accessible for so many people. You're described as an artist who uses metaphor to address very primary issues of civilization, perseverance against all odds. You've taken your land, the land where you were born and raised, and really made a mythology out of this great land and articulated the real true life of people there, not just presently, but going back centuries. So I'd love it if you could speak a little bit about what drives your work as an artist.
Well, you know, it has been a very natural development. Some people might say, you know, I've attempted to preserve the history of Newfoundland, or I've made a special attempt to illustrate the life of that particular region of the province where I was born. But it has happened very naturally and very casually. At the Ontario College of Art, in my first year, we were told it's very, very important for an artist to have a subject. That subject was very, very important. And so I gravitated towards storytelling was such a strong part of my upbringing and childhood that it was natural to, if you had to choose a subject, it was a wonderful choice.
And your the narrative that you explore in your work, if you could talk a little bit about what are the primary stories that you're telling.
That was part of the culture also, before the days of radio. Well, in Wesleyville, the town where I was born, no newspapers, no magazines in the household, very few books. Everyone would have the Bible. That was a very strong influence, but no television, no newspapers. So storytelling had been there forever. And people would gather in the evenings, neighbors and so on, and the older people would have these incredible stories from their own experience, from the experience of their fathers and grandfathers, and the children were riveted with these stories of, you know, disasters and storms and spirits that had been seen on occasion. So it was all very, very interesting. And then you were in church every Sunday morning, and there was a preacher in the pulpit telling stories. And then there was Sunday school, where some of the great storytellers were teaching Sunday school. And then we had teachers in school who were, one in particular was a great Shakespeare man, and he memorized the plays, and so we were riveted by that.
Could you talk a little bit about that process for you? How do you work today in your studio, if we could visit and see?
Well, as a student, I became aware of the fact that some of the really great artists had used printmaking as a means of communication. And Goya, Rembrandt, and right into contemporary times, Picasso, Georges Rouault, Braque, all those people were interested in printmaking as a means of a very democratic art form. And then printmaking also, of course, being a graphic thing, drawing is very important. And I had a very special talent, supposedly, in drawing, and it was recognized right in the first year. And one of the great teachers of drawing at the College of Art, was also head of the prints and drawing department. And he was constantly on the lookout for students who could really draw. And he would bring them into the printmaking. And subsequently, of course, I became very much aware of the fact that the copperplate etching was a combination of not just drawing and design, but craftsmanship in terms of working the metal plate and the printing. A tremendous combination of all the different, so it's a kind of painting, drawing, sculpture, all combined.
Science, alchemy.
Oh, absolutely, because there's a chemistry involved. There's a mystery also in that you don't have total control. There are sort of accidental things that can be disastrous or very wonderful. Really quite amazing. Everything is done in reverse. You can't see a lot of things that are happening. So it's very mysterious medium.
Well, it matches with your work. It seems in your work there's always a few things going on in a single print. There's what's happening above the surface and the struggles of the people and the power of the landscape and the irrepressible force of nature. And then it always seems like there's something going on under the surface. What the people can't see that's happening underwater. Where does all that come from, that sense of two worlds in one?
That might also be a product of, the culture, that where everyone is involved with the ocean and people are disappearing. We know where they've gone, but we can't see them. The philosophy amongst the Methodist people of a very thin veil separating us from the people who have gone before, and that they have passed out of our vision, but they're still very much a part of.
That explains a lot why there's a sense of spirituality in your work, that the life is always coexisting with death, and death with life, and it's part of the continuum.
As small children, every child in the village would go to see a new baby. Every child in the village would go to see Uncle John, who died yesterday, in the coffin. We would go and see the coffin being made on our way home from school. One of the local carpenters, we knew he was building this coffin. Can you imagine how fascinating to small children? And we would go in there and we would look into the box and so on. And then we would go to the house where, the gentleman was laid out, and you were expected, and someone would greet you at the door and take you into the parlor. And if you were very tiny, you would be lifted up to look into the coffin.
Tell us a little bit about your relationship with Dr. Loughnane. I know Catherine, for a number of years, is the premier prints and drawing specialist, worked at several museums before her tenure here at the AGO, now with special exhibitions, which is a wonderful new purview for you. If maybe the two of you could reflect a little bit upon the relationship between curator and artist. Most of us don't know how exhibitions come about or collections come to be. So Catherine, maybe to share a little bit about the friendship and the working relationship.
I think we have two stories. I remember my first meeting Kathy, and Kathy might have a different
When was it?
Well, my story is that I met Kathy at the University of Toronto. She was a graduate student or an undergraduate, and I was invited in to speak to the class.
I knew that I knew David before I saw the exhibition at the Doris Pascal exhibition, which took place in, I think it was 77 or 8, because I not only fell in love with the prints and bought one for myself, joining Doris's $1 a Year for Life Club, But I remember not only congratulating David, but making it clear to him how much I liked his work, because at that time, David's work was considered to be totally out of step with what the contemporary art world was looking at. And it was some years later, after we'd gotten to know each other in different ways through mutual friends, that David agreed to come onto our print and drawing collection committee, and subsequently began to play an increasingly important public role in the life of this institution, sitting on the board and chairing the board. But David's work is so rich and so layered and so vast that the word definitive wouldn't, I mean, you couldn't deal with it all in one exhibition.
Tell us how you work together to create all the contextual components of the show, the artifacts that are on view, the letters.
I think it's really Kathy's exhibition, right from the beginning to the end. I was there in the background and constantly consulted, but the idea for the show, the selection of the work, can you imagine choosing 70 out of 250 works? So it's Kathy's choice, the idea of the artifacts. It's sort of a Lochman exhibition.
Well, I want to congratulate you both on a beautiful exhibition, an inspiring one, a historic exhibition. The people of Ontario are very grateful for this corpus of material now to be here in our own province. And I hope that all of us, through the show, have a deeper understanding of the enormity of your contribution, and also the deep, deep beauty of Newfoundland and the stories that it tells. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're at the biggest hipster crowd I've seen in Yorkville in a long time, and they're all out here to celebrate the work of Sean Yelland and his brand new show at the Ingram's Gallery here, and that's happening at 49 Avenue Road, just north of Bloor. The show is entitled, "This Is How I Feel All the Time." Is your life that much of a disaster?
Well, I wouldn't say it's a disaster, but, you know, you have your optimistic and pessimistic days. You can take these either way.
Well, it's funny because they all border on disaster, but we never see the disaster.
Exactly, right? It's imminent, but it hasn't hit yet.
So what brought on this idea of looking at the mundane and the everyday, but putting it in this realm of either poverty or disaster, or you know, something's about to happen. We don't know exactly if it's going to.
Right.
You sort of hang us on the edge, but...
Well, I like hinting at a narrative. You know, the show's called "This Is How I Feel All the Time." And, you know, it's all just about introspection and the emotions that I'm feeling. But they're not always bad. I like to intersperse it with humor. So people come and see this and they go, "Oh my God, what's it?" Then they look at the title and it brings a smile to their face. So everyone can relate to these kind of feelings, I think, you know?
Well, you're a really formal painter, too, taking on these sort of disaster comedic ideas.
Right.
Where did...
We're on what is referred to as the school hill. And for generations, especially in the days of the Labrador cod fishery, when the schooners would be coming back here, and in the springtime when you could actually see some of the sealing steamers out offshore in the ice field, but people will gather up here on a daily basis and watch for the schooners returning from the Labrador, and that would have been quite commonplace for fishermen to go out in boats, especially on this cape, and to be caught in a windstorm and driven out of sight, not being able to make it back to land, or drowning, would be a commonplace thing. We're actually from the hill. We can see the older historic cemetery where dozens of sea captains are, the Labrador skippermen and sealing captains are buried.
It's interesting, though, that in this graveyard here, you say a number of you've painted a number of these captains.
Yes, a lot of the people, a lot of the names. Captain Llewellyn Kane, for example, and Captain Edward Bishop on the bridge of the SS Terra-Nova. A lot of the people in the cemetery appear in the prints.
Wouldn't it be wonderful to be able to play the violin? So different instruments. So watercolor painting is so different from the etching. It's a wonderful relief. You're working on these copper plates for a month. It's fantastic to take 2 or 3 weeks and just do color, watercolor. Big relief. And I do big paintings also. So you move from one thing to another, and it's, if you were doing the same thing all the time, etching, they'd have to come and tie you up and take you away, go nuts. If you're able to switch, it's a good thing.
So when you do watercolor, that's why you choose also flowers or something like that?
Well, it's different subject matter, you know. My wife's a gardener.
Oh, okay.
So, she brings flowers into the house, and they're beautiful, so that's a big inspiration. Or I go to someone else's house and I see great big arrangement of flowers, and it gives you an idea for the painting. Or someone brings flowers to the house.
big painting upstairs of tulips. And it was a gift that someone brought. Amazing. I didn't have the time to paint it. So I did a big drawing and painted it later on.
So talking about drawings, also it's some drawings and quite different to their very very simple, very not too busy. So it's the same idea.
Most of the etchings have drawings, ideas. We do the bigger drawings. And you see right here on the stairwell. It's an etching, but this came first, and then
the others ones. Those like those portraits that you do, they seem like they are people who are from the past. So you take
real people. This is a friend of mine when I was 12. 12 years old. He just passed away recently. So I was inspired to do that drawing.
Like a homage to him or something.
Too much smoking?
Too much smoking.
Junk food? You can only take so much. You don't smoke? Cigarettes?
No, nothing. Well, you have to have fun a little bit, right?
It's funny, everybody did at one point.
Oh yeah.
I smoke cigarettes.
Oh yeah, I used to smoke when I was young. Stupid I was like, but yeah. So, what's next for you? You keep doing the whole thing. It's like
I'm working on sculpture right now.
Oh, nice.
A friend of mine is a potter. Ceramics. Interesting. Beautiful medium. Ceramics. And sculpture. Relief sculpture. And so one thing leads to another. And you're working on something and you get ideas for something else. There's no stop.
Yeah, of course. Lots of days for a long time, right?
Yeah.
Keep working and working and working. So you think for a while you are going to learn or kind of master a little bit that technique about and then produce. But keep doing watercolors and all this stuff.
And when I was very young, I had a Pentax camera, you know, and I had a Kodak camera. I took photographs, and some of them are unbelievable. We didn't know. Some of these are black and white. Interesting.
Have you ever shown? Never? Are you going to?
But there's enough material.
Yeah.
What I've done, I've taken some of these little photographs and I've enlarged them. A lot of really good atmosphere. It's not done with any knowledge. It's just,
so it's the eye and whatever.
Everyone took photographs. And some of them are masterpieces.
Yeah. Well, maybe you have a few masterpieces there and you don't know.
At least 4 or 5. I know for sure. 4 or 5.
So, what do you think? You are going to have a show of photographs one day?
It could happen, you know.
Why not?
Everything is happening right now.
I mean, if you find like another, let's say, 15, 20 nice pieces.
Yeah, could be.
You could show them, right? Or make like 5 or 6 copies of each and then have a big show of prints.
We have a photograph of Bob Marley when he was 18. And he's running on the beach. He had a good friend, had a girl who had a little camera. And there were 4 or 5 people who hung out together, you know, friends. And She loved taking pictures. And there's a picture of Bob Marley changing the tire on the side of the road. Wonderful. She just had the camera and she took a photograph. And she was not a photographer. She just had a camera. And she liked taking pictures. And these are extremely valuable. Yeah. I think we might have paid $5,000 for one of the photographs of him running on the beat. A colored photograph. Amazing. Long before the reggae, big famous.
Now those photographs are quite
extremely valuable. She's actually had an exhibition.
Oh, really?
In Toronto, London.
Oh.
Yes.
So you can. There is a good incentive for you to show those photographs that you have because probably
it's important. Yeah.
Do you take sometimes from those photos you do some of your work here, or everything comes from imagination, or you
photographs?
Oh, okay.
I have a big collection of things and memory and real situations. Something like this right here would be real.
Okay.
Yeah, right. All of these flowers are real, right in the house. Yeah. Okay.
Well, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.